Coming up, a star from AMC's Dark Winds joins us after Sunday night's premiere, an update on medical education for Native youth, and a new book looks at Native journalism. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We begin in Washington, D.C., where the Federal Highway Administration is announcing $8.9 million in funding for tribal nations. The funding is going to 51 tribes for projects improving transportation safety on tribal lands. This new announcement comes in addition to the $120 million to assist tribes through the Tribal Transportation Program Safety Fund. The combined money comes amid a troubling spike in roadway deaths, especially among Native people. In a statement, U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg talked about the spike, saying, "At a time when Native Americans are more likely than any other group in our country to lose their lives in roadway crashes, these funds from the president's bipartisan infrastructure law will help improve safety in Indian country." The funding is now available for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. Now to Massachusetts, where a new leaked draft report says Harvard University is holding the remains of 7,000 Native people. The report says that identifying remains could include DNA or other kinds of analysis. However, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act says no additional research is necessary for returning remains. Lumbee citizen David Lowry recently finished teaching a two-part course on the Indigenous history of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Lowry believes if this report is done correctly, it could be the beginning of a major shift in how Indigenous people are humanized in the U.S.
If Harvard wants that, if the people that sit on certain committees at Harvard want this conversation to be the beginning of decolonization, the beginning of placing Indigenous people in the middle of American life and building on Indigenous knowledge and ways of, relating to one another, this could be that moment. But, Harvard has to do it.
The steering committee chair issued a statement saying the group looks forward to sharing the final report. In Canada, the Nunavut Legislative Assembly is back in session, and by its own political standards, this has been an intense beginning. APTN's Kent Driscoll has a rundown from the Legislative Assembly in Iqaluit.
This week, for the first time ever, the Nunavut Legislative Assembly is flying the pride flag. The Premier and many members of the Assembly praised the move from the Assembly chamber, but Iqaluit MLA Janet Brewster really drove the point home.
And as a member of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, I'm taking off my mask to say that today and every day, it is important that we are being more visible for the people who don't have the courage to do so.
And now, from members showing pride to members behaving poorly. The Assembly voted to suspend one of their members for one day of the Assembly for what they called public intoxication. Jolie Karnik, the member for Aglulik and Senarayak, was suspended. The motion isn't specific, but eyewitnesses tell us that last week on Friday, Karnik was intoxicated while asking questions at the Assembly. He apologized and promised to get help for his addiction problems. And now, for a political dogfight that has been haunting this government since the new Premier and Cabinet began to debate back in March. Adam Lightstone was elected to Cabinet in November 2021 and got the job of Human Resources Minister. In December, Lightstone's spouse was named Acting Deputy Minister of Human Resources. In March, the Integrity Commissioner got involved. Lightstone resigned from Cabinet for appearance of conflict of interest. The premier has said he only learned about the conflict of interest on December 21st. George Hicks and Joe Civickita are the ones who have been asking questions about this timeline for months. They don't buy the premier's answer. Here, Civickita explains why he's still asking.
And Mr. Speaker, the Speaker is correct. When a person doesn't receive answers, it makes you want the answers more. People deserve to get answers, even if it's not the one you want to hear, but an answer, as long as a truthful answer.
Celebrations and smiles. That was the sight last week as the cast and crew of Rutherford Falls celebrated the release of its next season. The event was held at the resort owned by the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Indians in Temecula, California. Star Jana Schmieding and showrunner Sierra Teller Ornelas were both on hand to watch the first 2 episodes. Schmieding and many others were dressed by fashion designer Jamie Okuma. This season, Okuma joins with the production to help with art direction. The new season of Rutherford Falls premieres on NBC's Peacock streaming app starting on June 16th. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, a new book looks at the publication Native News Online and a look at medical education for Native Americans. But first, Kiowa Gordon plays Jim Chi in Dark Winds. We'll be right back. Indian Country Today is now ICT. Dark Winds premiered on AMC on Sunday night. Based on the Tony Hillerman books, it's a crime show based on the Navajo Reservation. Lieutenant Joe Leaphorn is played by actor Zahn McClarnon, and Kiowa Gordon plays Jim Chi, the new kid on the block. And he joins us now. Hi, Kiowa. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So this show, of course, premiered last night. Tell us how you're feeling knowing that it's done, it's wrapped up with a pretty bow, and, now people are able to kind of enjoy it.
It's an incredible feeling. I haven't been able to fully soak it all in. I've just been, last night we were celebrating the premiere, had a bunch of friends go over to another friend's house, and we put it up on a big screen and just kind of just had a nice little premiere, and it was awesome. I had my daughter with me, and I still can't believe it's happened and it's here. It's been a long time coming, and I'm just like, I gotta pinch myself.
Yeah, I could imagine, especially since production, it sounds like, takes so long. Maybe take us through the journey of what it takes to film a TV show and then, of course, see it in post-production.
Yeah, we started about 6 weeks before we actually did principal photography. I got out to Santa Fe late July, and then we started filming August 20th after all the tests, and then went through November 20th, and then finally seeing it go through the post-production process, doing all like the ADR, and then it finally coming out. It's been a crazy time because you're just like waiting and it feels like you're in limbo.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to work with some pretty amazing actors, of course, Zahn McClarnon. Maybe talk about, the camaraderie on set and the people that you got to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I love Zahn. I've known him since 2013. We met on we were filming The Red Road with Jason Momoa in Atlanta, and he came in and we immediately started meshing. He's a really good dude, really funny guy, and we just kind of just took it from there. And I've been following his career, and it's great to finally come together on a project like this with him, and then also Jessica Madden and Jeremiah Bitsui, Deanna Ellis, and all these great people. Rainn Wilson. It's like having a family, and you're just kind of doing this together, and it's a really beautiful thing, I think.
I want to ask you about your experience learning Navajo. You, of course, aren't Navajo, so what was that like to kind of learn a different language?
Yeah, I mean, being Walpi, we're kind of in the same geographical area, but yeah, my dad actually went on a mission, and he learned Navajo back in the 70s. And so I kind of got pointers from him, and his mission companion lives in New Mexico. So he came and met up with me, and we did like a kind of Navajo 101. So that was pretty difficult to kind of learn a new language. And Navajo is not the easiest language. Yeah, so Navajo is not the easiest, but we had a a translator on set. So anytime we needed, to know that this is the right way of saying this, because you want to respect the language. And so every scene that had Navajo in it, he was there ready to help. So it was great.
You've been a part of a lot of productions now. Maybe talk about how important it is to have someone on set who speaks Navajo to kind of make sure that you're getting it right. Talk about that.
Well, it's great to have a cultural advisor there. It's invaluable because you want to get it right and you want to honor the language and respect the tribe and have that level of authenticity in your production. It's very important because not a lot of people care. And I think it just makes for better quality when you have authenticity and you have somebody there who can check you and be like, hey, you have to say this correctly.
Aside from having to learn Navajo, what other kinds of homework did you have to do to prepare for this role? I love to ask actors that question because you, of course, have to go into a character that might not be like your personality, but maybe tell us about that.
I mean, I feel like I was born to play Jim Chi. I don't know. I feel like it was already built to me because I feel like I had a connection to him, and his story really hit so close to home to me because he grew up on the res and then he left after some crazy trauma, and then coming back years later, it's like I'm kind of in that same boat where I grew up on the res and then left, and then I started acting and all this stuff, and I've gone back a couple times here and there, and it's really hard to stay connected when you have so much going on in your life. There's so many opportunities elsewhere, but it's time I kind of come back home, and really dig into my roots a little deeper, I feel like, and especially for my daughter's sake, to give her the same kind of knowledge that I got when I was growing up there. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, Kiowa, while we have you here, and before we leave you, of course, tell us what kinds of upcoming projects you have.
Well, Dark Winds just aired. That's awesome. But I have this movie called Quantum Cowboys. It's a crazy, multiverse, time-traveling Western, trippy movie that I did right before the pandemic. And it's shot, we did it totally on green screen, and then a couple outdoor shots in Colorado, and a lot of it is just an animated style. There's a lot of freehand drawing as well, a lot of different animation styles. It's crazy. It's directed by Jeff Marsley, also starring Lily Gladstone and my buddy John Way, and also David Arquette, Frank Mosley. That's premiering, I think, today actually at Annecy Festival in France. So that'll be coming soon. And I don't know. I don't think I have anything else coming out lately.
Well, exciting times, Kyle Gordon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys.
We have a bonus interview from the Reservation Economics Summit in Las Vegas. Editor-at-Large Mark Trahant caught up with Dr. Don Warren. Let's take a look.
Dr. Don Warren is Associate Dean at the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences. He's been a regular guest on ICT over the years, and we always look forward to having a chance to catch up with him. What's new at UND?
Well, we have a lot of good things going on. Actually, InMed, or the Indians into Medicine program, has been around since 1973. So next year is our 50-year anniversary of InMed. So we have a lot of celebrations and events going on around the 50-year anniversary of InMed. And very pleased to report we've now graduated over 260 American Indian Alaska Native physicians out of InMed programming. But we also have a new Department of Indigenous Health, which is really unique. I think we're the only medical school, at least in the US, that has a Department of Indigenous Health. And within that department, we have the InMed program and also a relatively new PhD in Indigenous Health. So we have students who can get clinical training through InMed or research training through the PhD. So kind of a lot going on at UND at the moment.
This is such an extraordinary time because this influx of money coming from the federal government into almost all institutions, but also the idea that there's different ways of doing things. And you've been really a leader in calling for a reform of how we should even think about some of these institutions. How does that shape now?
Well, I think we really need a movement to continue to decolonize medical education and indigenize medical education. And I work closely with the AAMC, that's the Association of American Medical Colleges. And one of the questions I ask them is, what's magical about 4 years for medical training? And it's really more of a colonized Western European approach to education, where we have a time-bound curriculum rather than competency-based curriculum. And if we think about traditional medicine training, medicine men, medicine women, their training might have been 4 years, it might have been 20 years, you know, and it shouldn't be just based on an artificial time frame. And a lot of our students struggle with that, quite honestly. So I think if you can get through in 4 years, fine. But if you get through in 6 years, you're still a doctor, you know? So that's some of the things that we're looking at. But I think long term, what we really need is an American Indian School of Health Sciences. And this school could have its own Department of Traditional Medicine. And when I look around the country now, there's, of course, over 100 historically black colleges and universities, and they have 4 medical schools at HBCUs. We have 0 tribal college medical schools. And in the year 2022, and as you're mentioning, new resources being developed to influence education and the economy, I think it's high time that we move in that direction and have our own American Indian School of Health Sciences.
One of the challenges is the size of our population. So where you put a medical school would be a really important question.
Yeah, we've put a lot of thought into this, and it has to be a city large enough to support a medical school, so it can't be in a small town. You really need multi-specialty health systems to do medical training, particularly for the clinical years. So it has to be a relatively good-sized city, ideally a city that does not currently have a medical school, because there would be pushback, I think, from existing programs. They don't like the competition, quite honestly, for clinical spaces. And then we also have to have a city where there's a significant number of American Indian patients. So I think places like Rapid City, South Dakota, Flagstaff, Arizona, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and maybe have virtual campuses in more than one location, and really focus on training our next generation of healers from an indigenous perspective, and recognize that we have our own cultural ways of knowing and cultural-based healing. In addition to that, we know that a lot of medical science was actually generated out of indigenous medicines, including things like aspirin, for example. So we have a lot of good medical science, and I think it's not been as respected as it could be or should be by the current system. So we just need to build our own system.
One of the things that would be interesting to see is how we get kids interested early in healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things we do through InMed. InMed, again, it's been around nearly 50 years. And our summer institute, we bring kids from American Indian communities from all over the country to UND during the summer. They spend 6 weeks with us. And they do basically like a pre-medical type curriculum. So they take courses in chemistry, biology, physics, math, communication, and health. And we keep them very busy for 6 weeks, but we also have fun and social events in the nights and the weekends, and cultural events as well. So our tagline historically has been middle school through medical school, but in truth we need to go even further upstream, and we should be thinking about pre-K to postdoc and have that whole continuum with opportunities for meaningful education in health sciences, but through an indigenous lens with indigenous faculty.
When you look at the economy and you see how in rural communities especially, healthcare is already the largest employer. That opportunity has been missing from so many of our communities.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're discussing here at RES 2022 is looking at the need for expanding tribal management of health systems and health programs, because healthcare is an industry. It's a business. People make money at it. And tribes just haven't participated in that industry to the same degree that we've participated in other industries. So in truth, you know, tribes can 638 or take over the management of their health systems, but they could even develop their own durable medical equipment companies. They could develop their own home and community-based services companies, or they could do other creative things, like even having their own insurance, or even having their own research that they conduct, you know, product development. All these things are available to us if we choose to go that route. So yes, healthcare is already a primary employer for many rural communities, but I see so many opportunities to expand that in Indian country.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but I want to ask you, one of the stories that I don't think is told enough about Indian health is how innovative folks are in the system.
Yeah, and you know, I think we hear a lot of negative things about Indian Health Service, and In truth, it's just terribly underfunded. It's not a broken system, it's a starved system. But the people working within the system, just by and large, are so creative and dedicated to our people. And in truth, we could have bigger salaries working in the private sector, but the people who are working in Indian Health are there because they want to be there. And the opportunities for innovation and improving outcomes are in front of us, and I'm hoping that this next generation will take us there.
Dr. Don Warren, thank you.
Indian country today is now ICT. Native News Online was founded in 2011 by Levi Rickert. The Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation citizen has published a book called Visions for a Better Indian Country. Hi, Levi, great to see you.
It's good to see you, Aaliyah.
So tell us about this book and maybe summarize what's inside of it.
Well, we publicized the book to bring attention to some of the major concerns in Indian country. And it's a compilation of like 48, I believe it is, of my editorials, and I write one every week. And it's published on Native News Online. And we wanted to get this book out. We actually kind of wrote it like as a fundraiser for us. And we had a special offering at the beginning of the year. And now it's available for those who did not participate with that, but they can buy it or donate, actually. We're calling it a donation more than a purchase, yes.
48 different columns. I mean, there's so much to touch upon in 48 different columns. Maybe tell us what some of them are.
Well, and obviously, they cover the basic, some of the huge issues in Indian country, such as Indian boarding schools, mascot issue, certainly the Deb Haaland becoming the first Secretary of the Interior, Native person. And so I think there's a really exciting time for Indian country. We're kind of like in this big moment. The Biden administration has been very, very positive towards Native Americans. And so we're happy to, I'm happy to lend my voice. And to be clear, I like to tell people I don't speak for all Native Americans in Indian country. And that's why it's called Opinions of One Potawatomi Editor. So.
Yeah, well, that's so important. I mean, the other big headline, of course, is climate change. Maybe talk about, how much you touch upon that in the book.
Well, yeah, and climate change is huge. Native Americans, we like to say among ourselves, we're the first environmentalists. So there are some editorials about that. All of us trying to move the needle. And I say when it's all said and done, when I'm dead and gone, people can say Levi Rickert tried to change the needle for Indian country to improve the lives of American Indians and Alaskan Natives.
You've been a journalist for much longer than me, of course. I'm a rookie compared to you and folks like Mark Trahant and Marionette Pember and folks. Maybe talk about how much journalism as an industry has changed since you've been here.
Well, what I like to say is I've seen more attention shown towards Native Americans in Indian country in the last 11 years, and we are in our 12th year, but I have seen it increase interest. And I think, of course, with Deb Haaland being the Interior Secretary, it has brought a renewed focus. Standing Rock was a changer. There's just no two ways about it. Non-natives who I talk to say, yeah, we didn't hear much about Native Americans until Standing Rock. And so there was a real lag time, we'll say, between Wounded Knee of 1973 and then Standing Rock. So yeah, there has been a shift, and I'm happy to see the attention shown towards Indian country.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also seeing that in more mainstream publications as well. And we're actually seeing Native journalists, being hired and employed by some pretty big names out there.
Yeah, that is exciting. We had Alyssa London, who is becoming a contributor to NBC News, which I think is huge, and I'm so thrilled for her. And I just hope it increases because we really do have a really great story. Our history is, albeit a lot of tragedy, but there's been some rich history for Native Americans for centuries, and I'm happy to see people paying attention to it.
Of course. You know, what really strikes me about you and your publication, of course, is that you're just like ICT, you cover news about Indigenous people. And I think it's really important that no matter where people are getting their news, that they're learning news that can change their life, that is important to them and their families about Native people. Maybe talk about right now what you guys are currently working on in terms of stories and reporting, and what we can maybe expect from Native News Online in the future.
And I like to say it this way, that mainstream media will cover the shiny objects, the flavor of the month, however you want to say it. However, for instance, when it comes to like the Indian boarding school issue, after Camp Loops, yes, the major media sources covered it last year, but we've done over 100 stories and we will continue. We have reporters on the ground that will be going to Carlisle in early July. There's going to be some more transferring of the bodies, to rightfully transferring to one case even to Alaska. So we keep up on those even when it's not mainstream focus at that time. And that's what I think is the beautiful thing about what Indian Country Today does, what Native News Online does. On an ongoing basis, we are going to keep reporting what's important to Indian country.
Absolutely, and we will follow your reporting, of course. Levi, thank you so much.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Miigwech to you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.